notice what happens right after you name your price. You've thought it through, you've been fair with market rates, and you know your work is solid. And despite that, this thought appears. Is this too much? Or a client says yes immediately and your stomach drops and you think, why did they say yes so fast? I must have completely undercharged. That moment isn't about money, it's about safety. I've worked with a lot of introverted freelancers and I see the same patterns. They're observant, they read rooms, and they notice nuance. In many ways, that makes them really good at business. But when it comes to pricing, that same sensitivity turns inwards. Instead of reading the situation, they start questioning themselves. There's a voice in our heads that appears. I'm sure you know it. It says things like, is this fair? Did I push this too much? Why haven't they replied yet? Maybe I should soften it. Now that voice isn't random. It has a job. And its job is to reduce tension because as introverts, we all fear tension. What's really helped me is to create a character around that voice. And I often compare it to old bosses I've had. We've all worked with bosses like this, the ones that always play it safe, not because it's best for business, but because it meant that they were never questioned. So they never wanted growth, they just wanted cover. And that's the boss in your head when pricing comes up. They're not trying to build your business, they're trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. And that's why most introverts don't massively undercharge, they just undercharge slightly. Just enough to avoid discomfort, just enough to keep things smooth. So when someone says, just charge more or double your price and see what happens, your body reacts because jumping numbers feels risky and it feels unjustified. Your nervous system is never asking, can I earn this? It's asking, can I defend this? As an introverted freelancer myself, I still struggle with this. And particularly anytime I have to price higher than I have before. Saying those words, that amount that is higher than I've previously quoted, is always really hard and it always makes me feel like a fraud. So instead of trying to be confident, I now use this rule, which has been really helpful, and I call it my 15% buffer. Here's how it works. When you reach a price in your head that feels fair, just pause. Before you say it, before you send that quote, pause and add 15%. And 15% is small on purpose. It doesn't move you into a new category. It keeps you in the same conversation. Because in my experience, you're either in the client's ballpark or you're not. And 15% is never enough to take you out of it. It's big enough to protect you, but small enough not to trigger panic. And this 15% isn't imaginary. In freelancing, the biggest drain isn't the work. It's late payments, chasing invoices, and difficult clients. If you knew a client would pay on time every time and be easy to work with, would you happily charge 15% less? The extra isn't confidence, it's insurance. But this also changes negotiation. Before, if a client hesitated on price or pushed back, or said something like, it's a little bit more than I wanted to pay, I'd drop the price immediately just to feel safe in the moment. And then I'd carry that feeling on that I'd sold myself short. So now when it comes to negotiation, here's what I say. Look, my price includes a 15% buffer that I add to cover late payments and clients disappearing. But if you can promise me that invoices are paid without chasing and things will run smoothly, I'll happily remove it. Now the price drop has a reason. You're getting something back for it. And something else has happened here too. If they want to negotiate, you're taking 15% off, but you're using that moment to make sure they're an easy client to work with. And here's the real shift. You're not charging more, you're just not automatically charging less. This is the first step to raising your prices without feeling like a fraud, because you're no longer asking yourself to be confident. You're giving yourself a structure that makes sense, a story your nervous system can validate. If pricing makes you feel uncomfortable, that doesn't mean you're bad at business. It means you care. But caring without structure lets the safest voice in the room run your pricing decisions. So give yourself a buffer and give yourself a reason and stop letting safety decide your income. If this resonated, I made another video about how I learned to sell as an introvert without scripts, pressure, or trying to convince anyone. This is the exact system I used to sell €100,000 of my services in 2025. So if pricing and negotiation feel uncomfortable for you, that video will help this one make even more sense.